The congressional hearing on, are these guys really saving patients money, and or are they just kind of scraping off the top? And just reading through those things, it looks so much like an organized crime, protection scheme. I'll make sure nobody breaks into your store, but I need $50 a week. If I have a drug and I want it to get access to patients, I have to offer them a rebate, which we could call a kickback. It looks exactly like a kickback.
Tell me your name and what's your background?
My name is Greg Stokes. My background is I spent about 34 years in the pharmaceutical industry. Grew up in a little town in Idaho, and went to school on the East Coast out in Philadelphia. Stayed in New Jersey, Philadelphia area for my whole career. And that's about it. Married a Utah girl out in Philadelphia. We have had 8 kids together, and last one just graduated high school and left last year. And
you guys met in Philadelphia?
Yeah, we met in Philadelphia. She was working back there, and I was going to school. And Idaho kid and a Utah girl.
That's funny, meeting out east.
Yeah, met in Philadelphia. So,
okay, before we get into your backstory, what's some about the pharmaceutical industry people will be surprised about?
To me, I don't know if people be surprised or not, but just the channel to get from a manufacturer into your hand as a patient for a drug is just ridiculously complicated. It's not like a car dealership or anything else that I know. There's basically 3 wholesalers, and every drug goes through them, and they sell to the retailers, the pharmacies. And it's just, and then you throw in their insurance companies and pharmacy benefit plans, and it's just a really complicated, messed up kind of situation. And it wasn't always that way, but it's in the last 30 years, it's really changed pretty dramatically.
So are you implying that it's almost like a monopoly or a cartel in that sense, in the sense that it's really controlled by just very few players?
I don't know that I call it a cartel, because drugs, it's too closely related to illegal drugs, but a monopoly or it's very limited who can sell drugs, and I understand it has to be fairly regulated, but but those guys, once they realized the position they were in, they really started to tighten down. For wholesalers, for example, used to be wholesalers. They'll buy your product, they'll mark it up 10-15%, and they'll sell it to the retailers.
Yeah.
But in mid-90s, early 2000s, if they're going to carry your product, they want a 5 to 15% fee. So the manufacturer pays the wholesaler in order to stock their product and to sell it to their customers now. And you can't, if you're a small startup type of company, you usually can't afford 15%. And the smaller your company, the higher percentage, because 5% of $1 billion is way more than 15% of $2 million. So.
Are the wholesalers, are they publicly traded?
Some of them are, and to be honest, I couldn't tell you which ones are, which ones aren't. They're McKesson, Cardinal, and ABC. It used to be Bergen Brunswick. I think it's American Bergen Brunswick or something like that now. So those are the 3 big ones that control 90+%. Now, recently, with more focus on orphan drugs, I'll say the last 20 years.
And what's an orphan drug?
An orphan drug is a drug that is appropriate for maybe 200,000 patients in the country. So it's a
niche.
It's a small patient population. And in the late 80s, there was some legislation passed that said, okay, we're going to give some breaks to companies that will develop orphan drugs, because they're not going to be huge dollar makers.
Right.
You're not going to have millions of patients. You're going to have a few thousand patients. But companies started looking at that and saying, well, I can charge a lot of money for those therapies, and even though there's fewer patients, I can charge more. And just the last case that just came up, I think a company just got approval for. I can't remember if it was AIDS or if it was Hep C or something, but it just got approval, and the cost is going to be $28,000 every 6 months.
Wow!
And that's a brand new approval, but they realize, like, wow, we can just jack up the prices here. And I'm not criticizing that, because the development costs to make that drug, they have, in order to make a profit, in order to stay in business, they have a limited period of time. IP exclusivity, intellectual property, patent life.
Right.
So after the patent runs, then anybody can do blood equivalency type of studies, and he said we have the same amount of product in the bloodstream as that, so that's the equivalency is it's based on that, nothing else. So
right.
then some generics can enter the market, and even that's changed. Some of the big drugs early on, when they got genericized, within a month, that profit line fell to, the prices fell 90% really quickly. But then they started saying, okay, there's a first generic on the market, and they get some 6 months before another one will come on. So there's lots of...
They've regulated how the generics come online?
Yeah. And so by the time you get 15 generic products, the price is down to very low. But there's this period of time now that generic prices can be almost as high as the manufacturer, the brand name product,
right.
Which kind of defeats the purpose. And certainly the generic companies did not spend nearly the amount that the manufacturers did in order to develop the drug and do all the studies and the clinical trials, which really cost a lot of money. When you're doing a bioequivalency study, if you're paying more than $500,000, that seems like a lot of money for a bioequivalency study. Then there's, it just takes a few of those to get a generic approved. But so then there's a lot of battles and legal battles over that type of stuff. But it's interesting nonetheless.
Do you feel like, I was thinking, in other countries I feel like drugs are a lot cheaper than other countries in general, and I feel like America is just considered, I feel like America is the place for the world that pays for and develops a lot of these drugs, and that's just the cost here. Because if you spread it across the world, you probably couldn't make that kind of money on a drug, because other countries don't seem to allow that profit. Is that true, or is that not true?
No, I think that's true, and I think it's based on the system, right? So we're the only country that has kind of looks at pharmaceuticals as a business. And other countries, there's one customer, it's the government. It's universal health care for all of their citizens. So the government buys and pays for all of the product. So when you have one customer, the negotiation is, well, we'll allow you to sell our product in the country, we'll buy it from you, but we're not going to pay that price. We're going to pay this price. So there's a negotiation to be had. And if the manufacturer wants to have access to that market, they have to give on price. In the United States, you've got thousands of customers, thousands of pharmacies. And so you can negotiate with healthcare plans, you can negotiate with wholesalers, you can negotiate with retailers, and even patients at the end of the day. So there's an opportunity to capture more cost. And you look at it as an outside third party and you think, wow, this is really unfair. I can get the exact same drug in Canada or Mexico or Europe for a third of the price or a tenth of the price. How come this is? And it's because it's the market. It's just free market-based economics that people will pay for it, so we're gonna charge for it.
Yeah.
If you allow me, I'll tell you a story.
Yeah, sure.
We had a product in a company I worked with 25 years ago. The active pharmaceutical ingredient was from the 50s. It had been around for a long time. Busulfan was the product, which is it's a chemotherapeutic drug. It's very toxic. It's just nasty. It's designed to kill cells. And the reason that where it was used a lot was in bone marrow transplant. Before you can transplant good, clean bone marrow in, you got to knock everything out. So you get a patient on it for 3 days, and it just makes them sick as can be. And it was oral. It was a pill. They couldn't figure out how to make a liquid form that would go into a solution with things to be able to get into the blood. And then we worked with some physicians down in Houston, and they figured out a way to make it soluble. And so we were able to develop that, get it approved. And
what year was this?
2003, okay. 2000, 20 years ago. And they, we launched it as a new drug, and we decided, well, we'll probably charge about, I think it was $1,200 for a course of therapy. It's a one-time thing, and it's part of a bone marrow transplant, which most hospitals and cancer centers would say, and insurance companies would say, we consider the bone marrow transplant as like this is the whole thing we're going to do for $150,000 or whatever it's going to be. So a part of that the hospital's getting paid, we asked for $1,500, $1,200, something like that. And meanwhile, the drug that had been discovered in the 50s was pennies. You could buy it, it was generically available. You could buy it for pennies. So we launched it, and the oncologists really liked it because it's kind of gross, but a lot of the time, the nursing time that was spent with these patients in the pre-transplant days in the hospital was cleaning up vomitus and picking out the pills out of the vomit, so you could tell, okay, how much went in. And it was a really kind of, you know, hit miss thing, and it was particularly difficult with pediatric patients because you need to get enough of this. I won't even want to call it medicine, but you have to get enough of this poison into them to kill enough bone marrow so that the new marrow that's transplanted in will take.
Right.
And it was just really difficult. But there's no pill loss when you take it intravenously, right? So we were able to do that. And Canada just said, okay, here's the price we'll give you. It's the same as the generic pill. And the guys that I worked with, they were kind of cowboys. They were, you know, hey, we're venture backed. We're here because it's a business and we need to make a profit. And we just said to Canada, guys, you know, thanks, but no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to sell it to you guys because this is the price and the value's there. And if you guys don't see it, then don't take it. And it wasn't even a month, and they called back, and the Canadians said, look, our oncologists are very adamant that we get this drug. What will the price be? And we just stuck to it. So it's the same price. We're going to charge the same price globally. That's what it is. If you want it, we're happy to sell it to you for that, but we're not going to give a break. And they immediately accepted it and said, yeah, okay, we see the value. So I don't know how often that happens, but I see most of the pushback about different prices with the United States and other countries. I think it's a huge problem for most Americans. They get really upset about it.
Yeah.
But just for me, it's just business. You're either going to say healthcare is a basic human right and we all have a right to it and it should be free and somebody should be paying for it, or it's a business, and if you can afford it, you can buy it. And I don't know where I land on that.
Yeah.
I mean, the older I get, the more I'd like it to be a human right.
Right.
When I was young and trying to make money and trying to figure out, I was like, no, this is a business. We do so much better than any other countries. We develop more products than any other country because it's a free market. It's a capitalistic type of thing. I'm not so sure of that anymore, but that's kind of I'm extremely biased because I spent my whole career in that. So I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but that's kind of the way my mind thinks based on the things I've been informed of in my lifetime. So
okay, so now let's back up.
Okay,
I want to back up. How did you get into the pharma business? And you grew up in Idaho.
Yeah, I did. So interestingly, my mom did a lot of different jobs growing up. My parents got divorced when I was young, first grade, second grade. And my mom started working, and one of the jobs she had when I was maybe in third or fourth grade was a pharmaceutical sales rep. She had no education. I don't think she actually even graduated from high school. But she got a job selling prenatal vitamins to OB-GYN offices, right? And it was a local Utah-based company. We lived in Idaho, but...
What was the company?
I think it was called Pharmix.
Okay.
I think like PHARMX.
Okay.
But I don't.
Yeah, I won't quote you on that.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
I was a kid.
That was a long time ago. So.
But I spent a couple of summers, I remember, riding around with her in her car, and I'd go and sit in the doctor's office and lobby and wait, and she'd go back and talk to him, and then we'd get in the car and go. And I just remember this is kind of a fun job. And when I was at school, one of my best friends, he was weight room partner, good guy. His dad was the president of a pharmaceutical company. And I got my resume ready as I was starting to get into my senior year. And he just said, you should send that to my dad because he sees a lot of resumes and he'll tell you, where it's wrong. It's like, okay. So I sent it in to him and it came back just bloody. I mean, there was red pencil all over it. And he said at the very bottom in just little letters, it just said, if you're interested in pharmaceutical sales, call Wendy Gable. Here's her phone number. She's a district manager for Philadelphia, New Jersey, South Jersey, and we're going to have an opening there in the next couple of months. So just send it to her and see what she says. So I sent it, along with probably 500 other resumes. I sent out
to all kinds of businesses.
Everything, yeah. Yeah, and it turned out I got three offers for work. One was in Portland, Oregon, with freight forwarding. That my brother-in-law was involved in that company. One was at a commodities exchange house in Chicago, and one was this small company called Reed Incarnate Pharmaceuticals. And my wife and I, we were engaged at the time, right as I was graduating from college, and we just said, where do we want to live? Why do we want to live there? And we just determined that it wasn't so much the job as the place. and we knew people in the Philadelphia area. We would both live there, and we had friends. We thought, hey, let's stay where we know people. We have some social connection. Stay for a few years, and then establish a family, and then we'll move back to Utah or Idaho, back where family is. So that was the option. Turned out later, she did not want to hire me. Wendy Gable had a biology guy, and he was a lot smarter than I am, and he knew the science and everything. I was an English major, in English literature. Oh,
that's interesting. So you went and interviewed with her?
Oh yeah.
Was she cold?
No, she was very nice. She was a good.
She just didn't think you had the background in medical stuff.
Yeah, so it turned out we had this other candidate and myself that she had narrowed down. These are the two that and she said, I'm going to go with the biology guy. And the president of the company told her, like, why? Like, because he knows biology. It's obvious. Like, we're talking to doctors, and this will be easy for him to learn. And I was, I'll say privileged. I don't like to use the word, but I was privileged enough that I was at the University of Pennsylvania. It's an Ivy League school, and he told her, like, we get a kid who's an Ivy League graduate. He'll be the only Ivy League graduate in the company. Why would you, And she goes, well, because of the major. And he goes, you know what my major is? And she's like, no. He goes, I'm an English major. Do you know what Joe, the vice president of sales major, was? No. He was an English major. And he goes, I just think you should reconsider that. Think about it. You can hire who you want, but you should think about it. I never knew this story till like 15 years later. She never said anything about it, and she always was just a fantastic manager. She was very good. She was always like, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Let me help you get there. I never knew she was forced to hire me, but she did a great job. I really liked her. She was a great first manager. And pharmaceutical sales is unique, right? You're not having a transaction. You're going into a doctor's office. You're asking for 4 or 5 minutes of their time to explain, look, here's a product that I think you need to be aware of. I want to tell you what to be aware of. Don't give it to this patient or that patient. But if you got a patient that looks like this and these symptoms, this would be a great fit. Will you give, and the close is like, can I count on you to write some prescriptions for this with the next patient that you see? That's kind of it's not a hard sell. It's more of an educational.
Right.
I've got information that I think you might find important. And a lot of doctors will tell you, that doesn't have any influence on them, but
clearly that's not true, or that wouldn't be the practice.
Yeah. I mean, you can't, when you're practicing medicine, if you're in a place like Camden, New Jersey, where it's all Medicaid and you're seeing 90 patients a day, you don't have time to look at medical journals all day and go to seminars and I can't tell you how many doctors I said who would tell me, oh, I don't, I use this one, and I would say, well, why do you use that one? That's just what they taught me in medical school. Well, that was 40 years ago. There's been some significant changes in medicine. So
what did you sell? What was your product?
Oh man, that first company, we had 13 products. Everything from OTC, kind of like head lice shampoos, to a beta blocker for high blood pressure. We had a dermatology product for actinic keratosis. I had a lot of GI products, bowel lavage before you get a colonoscopy. You got I had a hemorrhoid preps. What, a bowel lavage?
Yes.
It makes it sound really nice.
Make it French. Yeah, make it sound fancy.
Yeah. People love this because it sounds French. Yeah. So it's the thing you got to drink a gallon of before you go get a colonoscopy. That's what I sold. And ours was the first one to have a flavor.
Is that what it was? That was the colonoscopy thing, the cleanse?
Yeah.
Oh man.
And ours was the first one to have a flavor, and they made it pineapple. I was like, pineapple? Nobody wants to drink a gallon of pineapple. But and still, everybody still tells you that that's the worst part of a colonoscopy is that prep. So,
so would you sell all of that then?
Yeah, like in our territory. This was 1991.
Was Philadelphia your territory?
Yeah, I had Center City, Philadelphia, and I had South Jersey. So I go all the way down to Cape May. And I think I had 8 teaching hospitals in Philadelphia, Center City, and then a bunch of offices.
And it sure feels like medical is a big business in Philadelphia. It feels like to me. It feels like there's a lot of famous hospitals and stuff there. Oh yeah. There's a ton of really strong hospitals, and there's a lot of pharmaceutical companies. SmithKline, before all the mergers, they were in Philly, and they still have a big presence there. And there's a bunch of private equity groups that are focused on healthcare that are there. A lot of startup stuff that happens there, and it was a good place to be for that particular area. What's your best story from doing that? How many years did you do that, by the way? I was a rep for 4 years, but in the meantime, after maybe 6 months, so I graduated from college in May of 91. I got married in June
the next month. And in between that time, I started my job with these guys. So it was a pretty busy month. But after by the end of the year, I love sales, and I love that I'm out there on my own. My manager rides with me, once a month or once every 3 weeks, whatever, and I like that. But I didn't love it. It was a great first job, but I thought, I think I want to be part of a team, and I think that I need some more education. So I started thinking about maybe I should go to medical school. I like these guys. I can talk with them. I feel like that would be fun. So I went back to night school and did a year of organic chemistry. So I kind of get a handle on a little bit more of the stuff that I missed while I was reading Shakespeare.
Yeah, that's sure. That's
the romantic poets
from English, I would think.
Yeah, but it was just a community college, so it wasn't like But the teachers there were fantastic, and I learned a lot doing that. And the intent was I'm going to take the MCATs and I'm going to go to school. And then our first son was born in '93, and literally I'm holding him in the hospital, and I'm doing the math, thinking, okay, I'll earn a paycheck when he's in second grade. I don't think I can go that long. And I'm terrified of debt. I've always been terrified of debt. I don't like it at all. And I'm like, I need more education, but I don't think medical school is going to be it. So then I started thinking about what would I like, what could be enjoyable. And I landed on law school and just thought, I think that would be fun. And let me apply to schools and see what happens. And I applied to 3 or 4 different schools. I didn't get into any really good ones, but I got accepted into Rutgers. And Rutgers had a program. You could decide, do you want to go a full-time 3-year program, or do you want to go, they call it their evening program, and go 4 years. And I was like, well, so I can work full-time, keep my job, and go to school at night and come out in 4 years with a JD. That's a no-brainer. I don't want to stop work. I now have a family. I want to do that. So I got into Rutgers and started that program. And 2 years into it, they said, hey, we're going to offer a joint MBA for anybody who wants to. It'll shave a semester off if you start taking business classes. And so I was able to go year-round and knocked out the JD MBA in 4.5 years. And when I went to my wife, I was like, they're offering this MBA. I really want to do this. And by then we had 2 kids. And she's like, well, I don't want you to go back to school. It's like, but I know, but she's, the sooner this is over, the sooner I can have you back in our lives, and you can be a dad and you can be a husband. And she made me promise. She goes, if you promise me that you won't go back to school again after this until all of our kids are out of high school, then then it's okay. And I'm not exaggerating. It took at least 5 years after graduating for her to kind of forgive me about abandoning her. And when I graduated with the JD MBA,
man, that must have been busy.
It was a month before our 4th child was born. So, wow. I mean, and she was literally alone. I was teaching seminary for church in the mornings at 5 o'clock. Oh, I would go to work, and then I would be at class at 6:30 till 11.
Wow.
And so that was my weekday, was, early work, go to class. And so my weekends were either sleeping or reading case law. And boy, I mean, I literally just abandoned her. I feel really bad still.
Well, it's more impressive that she's still married to you, or that you finished schooling in that time.
No, that she's still
That's
married
crazy.
to me. Yeah, no, more than anything that she's still married to me. Because I recognize that, I mean, we brought almost 4 babies into the world in that period of time. And wow. I was not available emotionally or any other way. I'm still not really available emotionally, but just in terms of being there to help with those kids. Fortunately, none of them remember it. They were all too young, but it was a tough time. So I was in the pharmaceutical business. About halfway through the school, a marketing position came open, and I applied for it in the company, and I got the marketing spot. So that kind of put me into a team. I had really good experiences. They gave me the opportunity to launch new drugs. I launched 2 brand new drugs that had never come on the market, and I didn't have any real marketing experiences, but I had some really good mentors. The director of the department had been, he was probably close to 70, and he was really good at just one of the things he told me was, here's your budget. And it wasn't a huge budget. It was like, $1.8 million at the time. And this is your drug, and you need to talk to everybody, find out what kinds of things they offer to get out there in the advertising world, or to, you know, to talk to doctors better, or to deliver a message better. And then you get to decide how you're going to divvy up that budget, where you're going to spend that money. And then you're responsible for the profit and the loss of that drug. So what you want to do is minimize your spend and maximize the result. And that's basically all the teaching he gave me. And they said, go do it. It's like, there's a lot of money and I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, first of all, it's not enough money to break the company. And the expectation is that you're going to make a bunch of mistakes, but that you'll learn from that mistake. And then you'll know, okay, I'm not going to do that program again because here's the results we got and here's why. And then you'll come back and make better choices. It's not that we expect you to take this drug from $2 million a year to $25 million a year this next year, but we expect you to learn how to do this and what to do. And it was just, I couldn't have asked for a better environment. The guy was amazing. And that's probably, to me, probably the biggest thing in my career is just I've worked with phenomenal people that were just so, I mean, they cared more about healthcare. They cared more about the actual drug, that it helped people, it didn't hurt people, and the people that they worked with, they wanted them to have a good experience. And it was always, hey, if you've got a family thing going on and you need to take off, you go be with your family, put them first. We'll get stuff done. But because of that, I think people didn't really take advantage of it. It wasn't like a, you know, hey, I get it to work from home, so now I can, you know, right. I can spend 2 hours a day working and the rest playing. It was much more, and it came a time. I mean, to me, because of that, I was probably hyper loyal. I wanted to make sure that I did the job, completed it, and it was the best, you know, that I could do.
How many people were at the company at the time? Did you guess?
That particular company, I jumped companies by then. So we sold. Reed & Carnick was sold to Schwarz Pharma, a German company, in 1994, and then the CEO of that company was hired to be the CEO of another company called Rebates Pharmaceuticals, and that company had, I think we had 300 employees, something like that.
So you followed him over there?
Yeah, there was a period of time where I did some other stuff and I was not good at it, and I was invited to leave, and I called him and said, hey, what are you doing? He's like, you want to be a rep? I got a job for you. Come on over. And so yeah, I followed him there after about 6 months or so, and that's after after working there as a rep for 9 months to a year. That's when I got moved into marketing. So yeah, so that was it was a pretty good sized company. That was in '96 when I moved over to them, and then we merged that company with a company called Shire Pharmaceuticals in 1999. And Shire had a drug Adderall that a lot of people are familiar with. They had bought the company Richmond Pharmaceuticals that something like that, Richwood, I can't remember, something, it had a Rich in it. They had bought that company, and then they were looking to grow. And so we merged with them. It was a merger of equals. They were a publicly traded company. And the value that we were given at that merger was $1.23 or $1.27 billion. And that was the value wasn't even near that when John Spitznagel, who was the CEO and boss, been my mentor my entire life, when he took over, it was maybe half of that. And so they were able to move that into a pretty big company pretty quickly. We had the 2 products that I had been able to launch, and then we had purchased another product, and then we had a bunch of little tiny things. The guy who started Rebates Pharmaceuticals, a guy named Bob Vukovich, he was a scientist. He was an entrepreneur scientist, which you just don't see very many of them. But he was a really gregarious, good, smart guy. He had worked at Bristol Myers Squibb for a while, and he had found this, couple of products to be able to that he bought from them and moved them over, and they were in development still, and he was working on trying to get them through. And in the meantime, he bought a bunch of little, we just call them cats and dogs. They're like little products that are too small for Big Pharma to focus on, but they generate some cash, and if you get enough of them, you can have pretty good cash flow coming. Right. You're not, they just keep money coming in a little bit so you can do your development work, was what he did. He started the company in his garage. And by the time I got there, it was a publicly traded company that was worth some money, and he had investors all over the world. And he brought John in to kind of help it get stabilized and prepare it to sell to somebody else. And he I don't know how much he walked away with, but he did really well. And he was a fun guy to work for. He was very gregarious and very happy.
Was there a lot more players in the game back then?
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to say yes, because that's, again, it's my perspective. That area, what we did there is called specialty pharmaceuticals. It's basically buying things from other companies that these products are going to be too small for them to want to commercialize.
Yeah, explain that a little deeper.
Yeah. So if I'm a Pfizer or a Bristol or a big company, a Glaxo, I've got this huge infrastructure. And if I'm going to bring a product to the market, it has to make me a minimum of $1 billion a year, or else I can't afford to keep the infrastructure going. So the things that they're looking for are blockbuster drugs that can make a lot of money so that they can keep their engine going and keep.
Right. Okay.
So sometimes they'll think, okay, this looks like it's going to work. It's going to be billions of dollars a year, and they'll get it through all the clinical trials. And sometimes that takes, up to 15, 20 years sometimes. So your patent life is gone almost. And so they'll get through some trials and they'll find, well, there's some issues that we didn't see in the animal studies that come up with humans, and it's not going to be nearly as broadly used as we thought it would be. So we're either going to put that on the shelf, or we're going to sell it to somebody who's happy with a $25 million a year product or a $30 million a year product.
At this point, how much have they probably put into that product?
Oh, goodness.
Hundreds of millions, probably.
Yeah, yeah.
But then they're just willing, because they're like, oh, I can't really make a profit. It's like if I sell it at $25 million, I'll just get it off my shelf, and at least we get something for it. Is
exactly.
that how it looks?
Yeah. If it sits on the shelf, it has no value.
Yeah.
It's just there's no value for them. And if they can sell it to somebody, or even license it to somebody and get a royalty in exchange, or then at least that's some revenue. They're never going to get back probably the initial cost that they put into it.
Right.
But it's something, which is better than nothing.
And they have how many of those any given time? Dozens of those things?
I you know what? I've never worked in big pharma,
Yeah.
so I can't even tell you. I don't know the reality of that. I mean, we pinpointed a drug once that was actually on the market and called a company, I won't say who they were, and said, hey, we're very interested in this drug. We called their legal department. Could we buy it from you? And they said, no, I don't think that's our drug. They didn't even know they owned
really?
it.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was actually commercialized, and we ended up buying it from them, and that was, it worked out really well. But it was, it was
so small for them they didn't even really.
Yeah.
They didn't look at it as one of their main drugs.
And that particular product, I mean, we paid them $130 million for that product, and they didn't. It wasn't doing. I probably think it was probably doing 25 or 30 million at the time. But we saw that we could grow that, and it was the added value for us was we were going into that area, and we wanted to be able to meet the doctors, and it added. We were happy to pay that amount for it because we felt like, okay, we can grow it, A, and then B, it's going to fit really nicely for what we've got coming down the pipeline into the market. So it's it's interesting. I think it's like any business. Maybe it's a little bit more just because there's constant change and there's always new stuff. But that's what I loved about it was like it's all about, okay, can we make money with this? Will this help our company grow? Will it, is it stable enough? As you're evaluating products and what to look for, what to buy, why you want it, and then there's the negotiation of the value. Because more often than not, now if I wanted to go to Big Pharma and do something like that, they say, oh, these guys are willing to give us $130 million for this product. Well, let's have an auction and see how much more we can get for it, because we don't care who it goes to necessarily. We're just going to see if we can recoup some of that value.
Right.
So
that's what's changed since then.
Yeah.
Before they were just unloading, and now they're like, oh, if somebody wants them, let's see if somebody wants more for it.
Yeah, I mean, because if you're in business development, that's the job in a big pharma company. And your job is selling these products. It's a lose-lose. No matter what you're going to get for it, if they do well with it, and that's what you want the molecule to do well. They're going, why did you sell that?
Right.
Why would you do that? So it's a tough. From that perspective emotionally to try and figure that out. But it was sure fun. I really loved being the buyer end of that. And then what we would do is go in and we'd usually get venture money or private equity money, and we would split things up equity wise, and then we had a management team that would go and find these products and buy them and then build this company. We'd put a marketing and a sales infrastructure around it and get reps out talking to doctors and do that whole thing, and then we grow them. And then when it gets to a certain point, then we've got to find a buyer so that they can realize the return, the investors. And so we would...
Would you end up selling back to the
Never.
companies? Never?
No. But, a company, like we would always start like from scratch. Like this is a brand new company. And then the next level of buyers were like, well, we've got a handful of products, and we need something to help our growth come in inorganically, and this makes sense to us. And so there are investment bankers out there whose job it is to do that. One of them, once I was in a meeting with one, and he described his job as an investment banker as like, imagine a high school prom. There's 200 kids. There's 100 girls, 100 boys. Our job is to link up the 3 or 4 that are going to go home that night together. And I was like, okay, that's funny. But so they're very helpful in those types of things. But our philosophy, and this again came back John Spitznagel, he was very astute of these things. He just basically said, we're never for sale. We're never going to put a for sale sign out in front. But we're always for sale if somebody's interested with the right price. Right. So he would never hire an investment bank to go out and, like a realtor, put your, list your company kind of. But he would say, if you have a buyer that's in this range, bring them in, and if this works, we'll sign an agreement. And you can be our banker. You can represent us. But if we're not just going to go with one bank. Right. And I really like that approach because it gave people an incentive to go and find a real buyer, and it didn't just say, okay, we represent you and we'll do the best. So it gave us access to all the bankers. And I don't know that anybody would do that anymore, but it was a good experience for me.
In your career, how many of those things did you bring forward starting these companies?
So I did 4 startups. And then I got involved in a couple of companies that we call turnarounds, where they were already existing and they weren't doing really well, and so they brought in our team to see if we could turn things around. And frankly, to me, the startups were easier and we were better at them than the turnarounds. Yeah, you go into a turnaround and you think, oh, I know how to do this, and it's like, well, they've already tried that, it didn't work. They already tried that, it didn't work. They already tried that, it didn't work. You're like, well, there's a reason why this company is circling the drain. And it's not really anything that we can do differently as a management company. But yeah, all in, I worked for 8 different healthcare companies in my career, and I have a bit of, I'll call it ADHD. I know, but I have trouble focusing, and it was perfect for me. Where I ended up, and I don't know why I ended up there, but after the marketing thing, when I got my degree in law and in business, John asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, well, I'd love to stay in pharmaceuticals because I really like this business. I've had a few chances as a sales rep to be in hospitals and see the drug applied, and it saved lives, and they were excited, and the doctors were happy, and that was a really good feeling. It's like, wow, I'm not just making money, I actually saved some lives here by providing this product. So I really love the industry, but I said, I don't know that I can afford to be here. We've been married 8 years now. We're renting a house. We need to buy a house. We got 4 kids. I don't know that I can live here. And he was amazing. He's just like, well, what do you need? And I told him, and they came back with an offer that was 10% higher than what I told them I needed. And they said, we want you to stay. And then he said, well, what do you want to do with us? Do you want to be associate general counsel, or do you want to do business development? And to me, associate general counsel, and this is my son's a lawyer. I love lawyers, the ones that I know. Yeah. But I didn't want to just kind of read contracts and dot the I's and cross the T's and change your wording to my wording. I wanted to negotiate. I wanted to go out and see what's available. And so I took the business development job, and that was, for the bulk of my career, that was my job, was to go find those opportunities, find those products that are available, and then when the company gets to where we need it to be to get the value, sell it. And I loved that negotiation, that business end of things was just really, really gratifying, very fun.
What do you consider your favorite or your most successful thing that you're still proudest of?
Well, and again, when I say, hey, this was a team. It was.
I understand that.
I had very little to do with even just the economic growth and things like. My job was very specific, and I was a part of that, but couldn't have done anything without the other people. Yeah. So my favorite product was a product called Deflux, which was a guy in Sweden kind of invented it. It's just hyaluronic acid, which has the consistency of like hair gel, right? And they use it as a dermal filler a lot. They, if you get wrinkles, they put it in and it puffs it out, and so it stays there, and then it just kind of dissolves into your body after 3-6 months, whatever it goes away. You got to get new fillers. Well, this guy said there's some problems out there with kids. There's a problem called vesicoureteral reflux. So simply, it's you have kidneys, and then there's a ureter that goes down to the bladder. 2 kidneys, 2 ureters into the bladder, which holds urine, right? And then the urethra shoots it out of the body. So vesicoureteral reflux is when the urine in the bladder travels back up the ureter. And it's kind of interesting. And the reason it does that is because the ureters are at a wrong angle. They're at a little lower angle, so it can go back up. And it's kind of similar to eustachian tubes with kids. Like if you first 2 years, 3 years, you had 10 ear infections, they're going to put tubes in. But if they waited long enough, they wouldn't need the tubes because they, as you grow and you get older. So it's kind of that situation. But you don't know who has it and who doesn't. And so this guy said, hey, if we can take this hyaluronic acid and put little beads of sugar into it, tiny microscopic beads, that will irritate the skin enough that we can get, it's not the skin, it's the tissue of the ear, but we can get that to stay a longer time. So you get sclerosing or scarring there, it'll be a longer permanent kind of fix. So they experimented, and they took this acid, they went in through the urethra up to the ureter, the base of the ureter where it empties into the bladder. Just did a little subcutaneous injection, formed a little bleb, and it prevented. It's just
from going back.
Yeah, it's just a mechanical fix, right? Let's put a little thing at the door that it'll run out and run over
crazy.
it, but it won't run back in.
Up.
Yeah, and I was just amazed with the beauty and simplicity of that solution. And anyway, they had it, they launched it, and they were running out of Sweden, but they didn't really know the U.S. market very well. They didn't really know how to make it bigger, and so we bought that product from him. I found that product from a tip from another business development guy from another company. Said, oh, you should call this guy. So I cold called Sweden from my office and just said, hey, I'm looking to, and I talked to a guy for about half an hour, got off the phone, bought a ticket to Uppsala, Sweden, and flew over there and met with these guys. And after about 6 months, we had the money and we bought the business from them. And I just loved that. I just loved the product. I thought it was so elegant. It was with kids, which I like to see kids, getting better. You're working with pediatric urologists. There's only, I don't know, it's a small number, 1,500, 2,000 of them. So you don't need 15,000 sales reps. I think we had 25 sales reps. And they were highly specialized. They knew everything about the product, and they would sit in on the procedures and let was the doctors doing it, and kind of consult with them. And it was just a fun product to sell, and I just loved the elegance of it. There's definitely companies that I'm not proud of, and I don't even like to talk about.
That you dealt with?
Yeah, well, that I was in, that we just weren't able to do what we wanted to do, for all kinds of reasons. But
like, what were the big roadblocks you came upon usually?
Just as I started out talking about that channel, that pharmaceutical channel, it's become so difficult to deal with that if you don't have a lot of funding, you're not going to be able to make it. When I started in pharmaceuticals, people talked a lot about how great the margins were. We had a product early on that had a 97% margin. And largely because we were able to buy that off the shelf from a company that just had no value for them, and so we got and we could make it inexpensively, and people talked about that a lot, and so a lot of the channel players down the road said, well, you guys got great margins, I want a piece of that. So as a wholesaler, I'm going to take a 12% fee every time. Okay, and then there are these groups called PBMs, pharmaceutical benefit managers. And their clients are insurance companies. So if you're an insurance company, you're going to offer drugs, prescriptions as a benefit. You hire one of these groups to get you the best deals that you can.
Okay.
So
that's
like
it's a big buyer of drugs.
Exactly.
And they cut a deal for the insurance companies.
Exactly.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly. And there are 3 of those in the United States that handle 80% of all prescriptions.
Okay.
So three companies control all of that. And they are.
And when did they come into existence? Have they always been? Or is that something recent?
See, to me, I feel like 20 years is recent.
Yeah, that's no.
But no,
in the medical business, that is pretty recent.
Yeah, so I would say that, and I don't know. I remember when I first started having to deal with them, it was in the 2005, 2006 when they first kind of started to come out, and you would
were they regulated into position, or was that just part of the market?
I think it just came as part of the market. It was a benefit that a insurance company says, okay, I don't have to be an expert in every drug now. I don't have to be an economics expert in this. I can hire somebody and they will get me the best deal, right?
Do drug companies have interest in those?
No.
They don't have any.
No. But PBMs own pharmacies, and they own a lot of the mail-delivered pharmacies.
Or
well, CVS owns Caremark. So Caremark is one of the biggest ones, and CVS owns them, right?
Okay.
And so, Express Scripts is another one, and they have mail order pharmacy. So right now, well, I guess it was like last year in July. There was a report. There was a congressional hearing on, are these guys really saving patients money, and are they just kind of scraping off the top? And just reading through those things, it looks so much like an organized crime, protection scheme. It's I'll make sure nobody breaks into your store, but I need $50 a week. That's kind of the way it looks.
Go into that a little deeper. What do you mean by that?
So if I have a drug and I want it to get access to patients,
Mm-hmm.
I have to go through one of these because unless I'm happy with 20% of the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
I have to get it approved. So in order to get them to sell it, to offer it to all these patients and all these insurance companies, I have to offer them a rebate, which we could call a kickback. It looks exactly like a kickback. They say, okay, what's your price? What's it do? Why is it different from anything else? Well, I've got 3 in that category. Well, but they're not the same. They have a little bit of a different mechanism of action. It works differently on the cell level. Whatever it is, you can differentiate anything, right? And they get to decide, well, we're going to sell it or we're not going to sell it. Well, what induces them to say, yeah, we're going to sell it is, what kind of a rebate are you going to give me? And typically, minimally, they ask for 35% rebate.
Wow.
And I've been asked for 65% rebate on some products. So that's what they say is, like, we'll put it on the formulary if you'll give us this rebate. And that's the negotiation. So am I going to get 80% of the market or 20%? And how much am I willing to give up of my profit margin? That makes it really very difficult. And I'll be a cup half full and say, I think this probably started with good intentions. We're trying to get the very best deal for the patients. But that's not how it works, though. I mean, they claim in these congressional hearings, they claim that, a minimum of 80% of our rebates goes to our clients. And I'm sure there's a way they can say that.
Their clients being the insurance companies.
And the patients. They look at the insurance company and the patients, right?
Sure they do.
Yeah. Well, that's what they answered, the Congress people with. But it's just a really difficult maze. And it made it really difficult for a small company to be able to compete at all. It used to be if you had something, I could go into a doctor and say, listen, it's not for every patient, but if you get this patient, this is the one you want to work with.
Yeah.
And they'd say, okay, and they'd write a prescription. The patient would take it to the pharmacy, and the pharmacy would say, okay, I don't have that, but I can get it from one of the wholesalers tomorrow. Come back.
Right.
And they would give it to them, and either their insurance paid for it or it was out of pocket, whatever it was, and it was fine. But now the cost of the products are so high that you pretty much have to have a prescription plan if you're on anything long term.
Right.
And it just if you're not on a formulary, it's going to get denied at the prescription level. And they go to the pharmacies, they can say, yeah, but your coverage doesn't, we're going to give you this one instead. And so now it's not a matter of practicing medicine. It's an MBA type of decision. Well, the profit margins are better here, so this is what we're going to do.
Right.
Regardless if this would have been better for you or not. And, clinical trials in drugs, you do a clinical trial, but they're so limited in what there's almost all the big trials when they come out, they'll say, okay, overall, this is what we got. But look at all these subclasses of patients. We did extraordinarily well in 36-year-old females with a wart. You can find the perfect patient for your drug when you break down, who did it work well in and not. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that clinical trials, I love them. Statistically, they're important to prove that it's efficacious and safe. But at the same time, practicing medicine is different. I mean, you sit down, you talk with your patient, you know what their stresses are, you know why, okay, this is why I'm giving you this, and I think it'll work. And we'll come talk to you again in 2 weeks, and if it's not working, then we'll go to something else. It's different than, well, business-wise, we should give you this because we make more money.
Right.
And that's the state of pharmaceuticals today, is even my own physicians will say, I'm sorry, your insurance isn't going to pay for that.
Right.
Well, the physicians don't usually say that, but the pharmacists will.
Right.
And so then the patient's got a decision to make. Do I come out of pocket for this? Is it important enough, or do I just take my chances with a generic or with another product that's similar but might not be the same thing? And I personally have gone through that as a patient. It's really frustrating.
Do you think that's more the pharmaceutical? I mean, sorry, the what did you call them? BPM?
PBM.
PBM.
Yeah,
do you
pharmaceutical
think it's
benefits
that, or
management.
it's more the insurance? And is there regulation on this? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's a perfect question.
How does the like Medicare and Medicaid factor into this whole thing? Because I got to think there's some collusion with the government at some point.
Yeah, Medicare and Medicaid have the same type of system. Do
they use the same guys?
No, they
have their own.
Both. They have their own formulas and stuff, but they do use the PBMs. And so right now, a lot of these hearings that have taken place, I mean, the result of the hearings was, this is broken, you're not doing it right, we've got to look into this further and fix it. That was the solution in, I think, July of 2024. Excuse me, yeah, 2024. So it becomes more complicated when you introduce CMS, the Medicare and Medicaid programs into it. But yeah, it's kind of the same idea. We'll let you on a formulary if you'll give us a rebate. Bigger the rebate, and sometimes it's an annual contract, sometimes it's a couple of years, and you lose the contract. If you give enough of a rebate, they'll give you exclusivity. You'll be the only beta blocker that we offer.
Right. Everybody
will have to use you if you give us 80% of the profit. So that it's literally a business game, and Medicare does that as well. They're not blatantly out there to make money, but they're out there to save money because it's such a big budget ticket item when the government's paying for it. That part of the fear that I have of this universal health care one buyer is that.
Right.
Walmart kind of approached that when they came out. They just said, hey, the 500-pound gorilla, do what we want, or we're not going to stock you in the stores.
Right.
And that worked out okay. People kind of figured out how to deal with them, and then that's one of the fears that I have about, which has been happening since I got in the industry, big business pharmacies versus mom and pop shops. Back in the day, everybody knew the pharmacist.
Right.
Everybody trusted the pharmacist.
Right.
He knew your family. He wasn't going to let you take two products that were going to interact and give you bad. It's different now. It's not the same because it's big business, and I'm not sure if that's good. I'm not sure if it's bad. I'm sure it has benefits, but it also has drawbacks. So
I'll give you one of your take on this. This is somebody that has breast cancer, and it was HER2. They were treating her for HER2 cancer, and then she developed a rash. Originally, I thought it was triple negative, but she developed a rash where her cancer had been. It was breast cancer. It was really hard for her to get anybody to see it, which is whack.
To diagnose it, you mean?
Yeah, well, yeah, to see the rash.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, she's in treatment. She was currently getting chemo for that, directed at that. But clearly it wasn't doing anything because eventually they biopsied the skin and it was HER2.
Oh, wow.
But then they came out and said, well, there's actually a stronger medicine, but the insurance wouldn't cover it. So we're going to try that. So we have another one, which actually did work. But I thought it was interesting. I guess for me it was interesting that knowing that there was a better drug with a higher, more expensive, right? But with a higher efficacy, and she really wasn't even given that option. Like even if she wanted to buy it herself, which I thought was just so much screwed up about the medical business in my mind. It's so weird to me.
Yeah.
How I don't know. I don't even know what to say about that. But I'm curious from a pharma side.
So, oncology is a different animal than most commercial drugs, right? Because a lot of times an oncology physician has a practice, right? And they will purchase the chemotherapeutic agents. They'll purchase everything that they need, and then it's heavily regulated. They're able to sell that to the patient through the insurance company. It's I think it's a 6% markup or whatever. So it's called buy and bill. So they will buy the product and then they'll sell it. And so because it's such a specialized, and we haven't been very good at getting cures with it. It's kind of out there. It's a lot of gray. And so the oncologist can basically usually practice medicine more typically the way that they feel like, I think this is going to work better for you or whatever. But there's also the threat of, well, I can make more money selling this one. 6% of this is more than 6% of that. And so there's this other threat, which I honestly, I've talked to known thousands of doctors in my life, and I've never met any one of them, one that I thought would do something.
Would do that,
yeah, I just never have. Yeah. So my experience is different than what I read in the newspaper and what I've seen. Yeah. You know, there are bad apples in every industry, but for in general physicians, to me, I just think the world of them. But that happens, and there's that fear. But that choice was purely economic, whether it was the physician or the insurance company, right? And they can blame each other, right? Because it's never my fault. You know, the insurance wouldn't pay for that, and I didn't. The follow-up is that I didn't ask you if you wanted it and if you wanted to pay for yourself. Right. Whether I looked at you and said, no, you can't afford it and I'm not going to offer it, or I don't know what the reasoning could be. And there could be some great reasons.
Yeah, there might be some rational thing.
Yeah,
who knows? I just thought that was an interesting.
It really is. You know, my dad was a Idaho cowboy, and he told me years ago, hey, if I ever get cancer, tie me to a mule and just slap it on the butt and send it out, into the mountains. I just want to get eaten by a cougar or something. I don't want to go through chemotherapy. And I just used to think, well, that's ridiculous. The older I get, the more I think, yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, just the whole process of chemotherapy. It's terrifying to me because this is serious. This is your life. And you have to, I don't like these life and death type of scenarios. I was happier with hemorrhoid preparations, but yeah.
Okay. Clarify some other things for me from the pharma side. Okay, so you hear the idea that doctors get paid to put X amount of people on statins. Is that true or is that not true? Are they bonused by that? Do you know if that's true?
I have never in my life heard of pharmaceutical companies paying doctors for prescriptions. Now, I'm just going to say that. That's okay. Yeah. What I have heard of is hiring physicians to be advocates for your drug. So if I'm in a teaching hospital, I'm a world-renowned guy, I'm going to be what's called a key opinion leader, and I'll go talk for you. I'll give a talk based on a therapeutic, or on a disease state, and list all the therapeutics. And by the way, I like this one. These guys make it. They sponsored us here today
at a conference or whatever.
Right, at a conference. So there's that type of business that goes on, interaction. Yeah, really typical. And if you actually ask a physician, where do you learn about new drugs and stuff, that most of them will say those types of conferences. Right. And what a lot of them are continuing medical education. CME, continuing medical education conferences that are. You can only say and do certain things, and they could, a company can sponsor it, but they can't have anything to do with the content. Right. So they're pretty heavily regulated. Interestingly, though, and I don't know where this comes from. I just read this like a month ago. I read this book, and it's about vaccines, and again, it's one source. I can't say that I know this is true. I've never seen it, and I was just kind of shocked because it was about this woman who wrote it's a nephrologist, and she.
Oh, I've read this book.
Yeah, Dissolving Illusions, right? Yeah, I'm like, I'm reading it going, are you kidding me? And her position was that the hospital got paid, and I don't know by whom, whether it was a joint committee or if a regulatory committee, or if it was an actual the manufacturers of the vaccines, and this was prior to COVID. This was in 2012, 2013. Well, she's a nephrologist, so she's a kidney expert. She has 3 patients come into her practice, into the hospital at the same time, and they all are in kidney failure. And the only thing they had in common was they all got the H1N1 vaccine the week before. And she's like, well, you can't ignore that. There's something happening. So she treated them. One of them passed. The others didn't. So she started digging into what's in this vaccine that could be causing kidney failure. And she just asks the hospital administration, could we make sure that we vaccinate these people, but could we do it on their discharge instead of their day one in the hospital? Because I think I can save more lives by doing that, getting the kidneys back on, and then we can vaccinate them. And she said she never, ever experienced such pushback on anything. And that's a pretty benign request. Yeah. But there was a protocol that the hospital had to follow, or didn't have to, but chose to follow, because they received an enormous sum of money to make sure everybody was vaccinated. Anyway, the whole book it's an anti-vax book, which I don't know that I believe it or I don't, but it's good information to have in your noggin to think about things. But that's the first I've really heard of. Okay, somebody's going to get paid money to prescribe a specific drug. Oncology, on the other hand, I described the buy and bill model, so that would fall under that a little bit. You're gonna make money. You're gonna be part of that commercial chain to the patient, so you're gonna make some money off of it. But that's very limited, the amount. I don't know of any other situations, and that could just be my ignorance. But in the pharmaceutical areas, the therapeutic areas that I've worked in my life, I've never seen
that was not a part of that.
No, never. I had a guy ask me to take him to a Phillies game once. I was like,
like a doctor or something?
Yeah. He was like, hey, don't you guys have like Phillies tickets or whatever? I was like, I don't. I don't have that kind of a budget, but I'm sure some of the big guys might have that. This was prior to they stopped. That type of marketing got outlawed in the late 90s or early 2000s, where you can't even give a pen with the name of the product on it anymore.
Right.
So those type of practices were pretty common. I actually had a guy, a gastroenterologist once. I'm sitting like this talking to him. I was like, look, I got this great product. And he goes, Greg, your competitor, he's my best friend. I golf with him 3 times a week. I'm never going to write your prescription because he is somebody that I support and I like. It didn't have anything to do with the product at all, right? And he goes, what else do you got? Give me something else and I'll write it for you. What are the products? So I just switched gears and pulled something else out. So, okay, well, how about this, right? So so I know that those relationships are important. And to me, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Who would hire 5,000 salespeople to go knock on doctors' doors if it didn't work?
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
way too big of an expense. But it was never at least, this is just my experience. I'm sure bad stuff happened. I know it did. But I never saw that. We just never had budgets for that in the companies I worked for.
Yeah.
It was much more of a relationship.
Right.
Our training was like, you got to develop a relationship of trust, and you got to be able to make sure that these guys know that you're not there to kill their patients. You're not there. You're there to help their patients, and you want to be used as a tool in their practice to be able to provide the best health care they can. And that was kind of the way that we were always trained. I think everybody was trained that way, but I think other companies might have had a lot more budgets to be able to do a lot more different things, and people found problems with that. So
yeah, what's your take on advertising on TV? Big pharma.
I don't like it. There's a again, I don't like it because I'm really biased. There's just from a legal perspective and liability, right? There's a legal doctrine called the learned intermediary. So, and that physician fits that, right? He's a doctor of medicine. He's an expert on medical therapies, and he's the one who can decide and give you the best. This is what I want you to take, right? So that allowed pharmaceutical companies a certain amount of non-liability. Okay, there's product liability, which is different. But if I'm a doctor and I prescribe this for what it's indicated for, there are trials that show this is what it works for and it's safe and it's effective. There's some protections there. When I open that up to more of a commercial, I bought 30 seconds on the Super Bowl and now, everybody wants me. Right. And I go in as a patient to a doctor and say, I want you to give me this drug. Well, I don't think it's the best drug for you. That's okay. I'm going to go to the doctor across the street and he'll give it to me because so you're going to lose patients if you don't. And to me, it's a difficult thing, and I don't know that there's a right or wrong. And maybe it's because I don't have confidence in humanity at large that they're going to make the best healthcare decisions for themselves, which sounds really arrogant and stupid. But it's because I don't think I make the best healthcare decisions for myself. So I assume everybody's like me. That I think it's a little bit dangerous, and it's been happening now since the mid-'90s, right? I think that's when we started direct-to-consumer advertising. I never had a chance to do it. I never had a budget big enough to really do it. Back when I was in marketing, if you wanted to do that effectively, you needed probably close to $30 million in budget for TV advertising. And it is kind of crazy to me because the regulations insist that you list the major adverse events and the most common ones. So at the end of every one of those pharmaceutical commercials, you get, may cause blindness, death, left arm falling.
Strange.
And they say it very fast. And it's like, if you listen to it, you think, why would anybody ever use this drug?
Yeah.
And then you realize, though, that some of these medical problems they're huge issues. And it's always a cost versus benefit. What am I willing to give up in order to get the benefit that this drug brings me? And that's what the companies are thinking. That's what the marketers are thinking. Ultimately, that's what the doctors are thinking and the patient. Even with literal physical price, dollar bills. I've been on the phone with lots of patients who, are troubled because the medication costs me too much.
Yeah.
And then, you go to this pathway of, well, where do you spend your money? And is that worth it? You want to not eat at McDonald's 3 times a week, and then maybe that could be the price that you pay for the, that'll be a win-win, except for McDonald's. They'll be the lose. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't disparage McDonald's.
That's okay. That's okay.
For all I know, they're much more healthy than what I eat. So at any rate, that's the question, right? And to me, if you have confidence in the population at large that they'll make the right choices and that they won't force their healthcare provider to just give them what they want, I don't know. To me, it just feels like that's the wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just that it shows how old I am. And
have you ever heard people? Because a lot of people are saying that a lot of that advertising is really to affect how reportage is done on pharmaceutical stuff. Because I've done a lot of pharmaceutical stuff in the advertising business, and just knowing that 70–80% of what's on television is pharma advertising, which is crazy how much it is.
That's insane. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then you realize, when you have something coming out, you're going to get favors because all those networks, Fox, CNN, all those networks, they're totally beholden to that group, and you're not going to talk crap on anything.
Yeah, that makes perfect
that's
sense.
Your bread and butter.
That makes perfect sense to me. And I've never even thought about that because I've just not been in that end of the business. But I buy that 100%. You don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah.
You're not going to give a negative news story on somebody that's giving you 75% of your revenue.
Yeah.
Maybe you are. I don't know. Maybe that's like me saying a doctor would never take money to prescribe drugs. I don't.
It's interesting. I feel like COVID has. People are more. I feel like it broke a lot of things open, but a lot of people are really concerned about food, and I think RFK coming out and talking a lot about food, and other people coming out talking about American food and the number of chemicals in American food, and quite frankly, the health outcomes in America as a first world country are probably the worst of any first world country in the world, and yet we have the most expensive healthcare in the world. And the most drugs in the world, and you brought that up earlier about governments funding healthcare, and I've often wondered why food in America that's illegal in Europe, and vice versa, and yet is the part of that because if the government's paying for everyone's healthcare, they actually don't want chronically ill people. And there's a lot of money to be made with chronically ill people. If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I don't know. I just see the health outcomes, and it's hard to actually go, well, what's actually going right in the United States? I mean, I know we're good at fixing heart attacks and broken bones and complicated surgeries and stuff, but all the other stuff is just a net negative, I feel like, when you look at it. The diabetes and chronic illness, I don't know.
It's a really good, unique perspective. That I'm not a deep thinker, but that makes sense to me that we are good at fixing things, certain things, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
But I think they're good at preventing them from happening in the first place just because of lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think that might have just to do more with the will of, I don't know what you call it, government. I'll say the will of the people.
Yeah.
Like the American attitude is, I want what I want, and you can't say I can't have it. And I want my trick cereal to be brighter in color.
Yes.
And that's what I want. So don't take it out because that's not what I want. And there's, you know, that over regulatory, I won't say it, just normal regulatory oversight. I think a lot of Americans push back on that kind of stuff. And businesses will utilize that to just cut through it, right? So I think it might have something to do with the capitalist and the American.
I feel like convenience is a big deal. Everybody, okay, the Ozempic thing is huge.
Yeah.
And I'm shocked at the people who are doing it. And again, that's a thing that Europe will not, even though Ozempic comes from
Novo Nordisk. Norway.
Yeah.
Denmark.
And they won't,
Denmark.
you know, they won't approve, and they're making tons of money on it, but they won't approve it in Europe for weight loss, only for diabetes.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. But it's such a convenience thing.
Yeah.
If you can just take a pill and just quell your appetite, it's so convenient. And I feel like so much of American ethos is to be convenient, to be efficient. So, and a drug is just a quick way to get to a problem rather than change the way you eat or changing your lifestyle or.
No question. The other thing that's interesting about that is that, you know, we don't have a lot of long-term studies on things. Old drugs, sure, we've got lots of data. There's metadatabases that you can pull together and say, oh, wow. And we had some very big drugs that 15 years later, hey, that's causing this. Yeah. Let's pull that off the market. And that's happened a few times. And nobody knows, do you blame the FDA? Do you blame the pharmaceutical companies? Well, I don't have an answer for that because you can't wait 20 years to put a product on the market if your objective is to make money and be a company. Right. There's just no value in it because your patent life is run unless they change the IP laws. But those are real problems. And I don't know that I would do my cost versus benefit analysis that I would, you know, I'm not, if I don't know that exists because I took the drug in 20 years, that I would take the drug today, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I think all those things are really interesting to think about. I wish there was a really good answer, but I don't know the answer. But I agree with you. I think given the opportunity, I would want to live more of a European lifestyle with diet and whatever it is that they're doing. That, you know, the heart attack incidence is way lower. Yeah. Whatever it is, I think I'd rather do the preventative than the quick fix. Yeah. But that's not how we live here. No. We live so much differently. It's hard to live that way here. Yeah. And I want to say that, but again, you know, hey, you got a Snickers here, I'm probably going to eat it. Yeah. So it's, and again, I hate to disparage brand names.
That's true.
I like them. So
I think when I talked to you earlier, you were just saying how it's just, the system is so huge and there's so much money and there's so many interests in it. It's hard to change the system. Like this pharmaceutical wholesalers,
I mean, not the wholesalers, but the PBMs.
The PBMs. So they're different. They're considered not a wholesaler.
Right. They're not. They're a different entity. Yeah. So, you know, the 15% from the wholesale, and then on top of that, you got 35, 40%. You know, so there's no margins like there used to be because everybody kind of dipped their snout in the trough, which that's neither here nor there. But that's what makes it difficult to get into the pharmaceutical business today and to be able to, you know, do any type of R&D or even acquire products because it's incredibly difficult to get the kind of funding you need to make a company prosperous and go. But you're back to your point, I guess. Those guys went through congressional hearings and the finding was, this is messed up. You guys are lying. All your answers sound like lawyers wrote them. We need to look into this more and try to fix it. That was the outcome of the hearing.
How long ago was that? It
was July of 2024.
Oh, so a year ago.
Yeah. But that, I don't know what, to me that sounds like self-regulation. Like go you know, we want you to come back and fix this. But they're not gonna fix it. Yeah. Because their answer is no, everything we do for our clients. That's who we get paid for and that's what we do and they're getting the full benefit. And I think their model is something like, you know, if we get a rebate, we get 20% of it. You get and I'm sure that's not the same for everyone, but that's, you know, a typical model. Yeah. But if we get a 65% rebate, we take 20% of that and everything else we pass along. But I'm sure that I'm not sure of anything, but I feel like, you know, costs, expenses, all kinds of things are going to go in it. And it doesn't all go back to the patient. I know it doesn't.
Right.
Because they're not buying Ozempic for $2,500 a month.
Right.
They're getting a 65% rebate, but the patient is still paying the $2,500. So
Right.
that's
Right.
whatever drug it is.
Right.
That's kind of it's a hodgepodge that's really hard to see into. And if you got to see into it, you probably wouldn't understand it anyway, because I'm sure there's so many you know so many things going on. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Did you become disillusioned as your career went on through of that stuff?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know, disillusioned is the word. Probably more angry when I was being asked to give these kinds of rebates that just I can't exist as a manufacturer. And their response was, well, we're not going to do business then. So, okay, I can't exist that way either. So
it
then
really seems like a way for large. I mean, it's great for large drug manufacturers in the sense that you're quelling competition. And if you're a Pfizer, you probably have Pfizer or Glaxo or whatever. You have leverage because you have so many drugs over those guys. If you're small, you're in the complete opposite position.
Yeah, and I can afford to give you a 35 or 50% rebate because there's some that you're not asking for any. But because I got these things kind of bundled up together, here's the package.
Yeah.
I can figure out a way to make a profit here.
Yeah.
But if you got one product or two products, you're kind of in trouble. It's like, well, we kind of, and now that the other thing that gets factored in here is years ago, you do a clinical trial and you say, does it work and is it safe? And now you have to be able to say, can we differentiate what's going to make a PBM or an insurance company say, I will pay for this? And so you got to look at, which I actually think it's smart. You shouldn't just have a bunch of Me Too drugs. But if you can show that you're better in a patient population for whatever reason, you should be looked at, because guaranteed, if you're one of those PBMs, you've got that patient in your population. So it should be available if it's necessary. And there are systems, you can override that. A doctor can say, yeah, this is medically necessary. It takes so much time out of a doctor's schedule, his staff. He's got to hire another person on the staff to be able to negotiate with the insurance company. And insurance companies, again, I mean, 9 times out of 10, whatever it is, we deny that. And you're going to have to appeal it twice before we approve it. If you're going to keep after us, we'll probably approve it just to get you out of our hair. But first pass, yeah, we're not going to pay for that. And that is, again, that's just it's another incidence of, this isn't the practice of medicine. This isn't a doctor he's got a medical doctor degree, knows medicine, knows what he wants to use and why he wants to use it, and then somebody with an MBA telling him, no, you can't use that. It costs too much money. So, and it does not just insurance companies. When I started out calling on doctors, so many of my doctors, their practice was at their house. They owned their practice. It was their business. And I never called on a doctor that I felt like wouldn't see a patient because they couldn't afford to pay me. Right? If you couldn't afford to pay me, they'd be like, look, it's okay. As you get the money, bring it in, or, you got anything of value at home, eggs. And I'm not saying like it was the 1800s, but I knew doctors that took payment in kind just because they wanted to help people. And I'm not saying doctors don't want to help people anymore, but now I don't have a practice. I work for a major healthcare company, not a pharmaceutical company, but whatever it is here. There's a big one in Utah. Almost every practice now is owned by a company. And so the doctor's an employee, not an owner of the business. He doesn't get to decide if he's going to charge you or not. Billing doesn't even have anything to do with him. But he can get a note or a letter from the owner of the company saying, hey, you're writing too many prescriptions for this, or you're sending too many patients for this test. You need to back that off because it's costing us too much money. So a medical degree doesn't give you the right to practice medicine anymore. And I don't know that it would be nearly as much fun from the practice of medicine perspective to be a doctor today as it might have been. But it's probably much less of a headache because not every doctor is a good businessman. Yeah. And it's probably much better for them stability-wise to be able to work for a company, have a salary, have benefits, et cetera, than it would be to, this is my shop, this is my name on the door. I live right next door, in the same house. Or whatever,
yeah, and medical school is so expensive. When you come out of it, you're a slave.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You're not going to buck the system, and you probably have to go to work for a big provider, and if they ask you to practice medicine a certain way, you're probably going to do that because you can't. It's not like you're in a profession you can go operate outside of the you can have your license revoked by a committee.
Absolutely.
So you're kind of like, but yet you're owned because you have this huge loan that's hanging over your head.
Yeah.
That you can't really practice outside of a system that dictates how you. I feel like COVID. The whole COVID thing has just shifted how people view doctors and stuff in a lot of ways. I feel like. I feel like it shattered the illusion a lot of people had about. And this is my example. Having done. Worked a lot commercial stuff with pharmaceuticals. There was never a job I wasn't on, and I did stuff for. The first one I ever did, I think, was a herpes commercial.
Okay.
And they were really particular. I mean, lawyers and stuff on how the couple would hug and stuff. Like legal stuff was huge. And then I did a series of commercials with people talking about efficacy of how a drug affected them. Always lawyers on set. Never could anything be super optimistic. It always had to be, tamped down. Everything had to be measured. So when COVID comes out and the head dude of Pfizer is saying it's 95% effective or 98% effective, and Fauci's saying it's 98% effective, and that if you get the vaccine, you'll never pass it or spread it or whatever. And my brain is going, my brain says, wait, I have been working pharma ads forever, and no one can say 98%. No one can say 100%. No one can say this will never happen. No one in that business would ever say that because you're not allowed to. Lawyers and everybody say, no, you have to actually really keep the expectations down. And that really made my brain spin a little bit. I was like, well, this doesn't match anything that I've ever seen in relationship to the pharma business and advertising. And people are talking such big numbers and so sure of themselves, which obviously has turned out not to be true, the stats. But it was very odd, and it was kind of shattering in my mind of like what's real in that business and the FDA and the CDC, and I don't know. It was very odd.
Yeah, I hear you. To me, I was just shocked with the rapidity of getting approved, right? Because I know how long it takes to get a drug approved, but the claims that were made and the time that was given to get there, and I know that there was prior work done on these these types of vaccines, and I don't know much about vaccines. I've never sold a vaccine or manufactured one or anything, but I was just shocked at how quickly it was developed and how optimistic everybody was. From the advertising point, I feel like it wasn't even advertising. It was, no, you're doing this, and if you don't do it, you're an evil, bad person.
Yes. And
you're just going to get my family sick because you refuse to. Yeah. I got inoculated. I had to travel for work, and they wouldn't let me on an airplane. And so, but I have a really close friend. She was a nurse. She's like, I'm not putting that in my body. She got fired. She couldn't be a nurse in New Jersey because she would not get the vaccine. And she was a great nurse. I mean, she wasn't just she cared, and they just, not going to happen. So it's really hard for me to get my hands around because it wasn't. I know that there was business in it. The businesses made billions of dollars in the ones that brought forth those vaccines, and I know business was part of it, but it was more than just advertising. It was something different than anything I've ever seen on the healthcare side of things. Yeah. And especially now in retrospect, I'm like, wow, I was as blind and dumb and happy as anybody. Like, okay, I guess we better get vaccinated. I didn't have any adverse events. I didn't have any problems with it, but I think I got COVID once after the vaccination, but not before. But I don't view myself as really being a cohort with anybody. It's just it was what it was. But
what do you see the future of pharmaceuticals now at this point?
That's again, I don't know. I kind of have like what I would hope would happen, but again, I don't think like I have a good enough solution to really like. Well, that makes sense. We should all do that. But I would like to see. I just love the system of you're incented financially to do good and to find good things. I like that because I just again, this is I'm sure the world would argue with this, but I just feel like you want to incent somebody to do something, pay them well, make it worth their while. And maybe that's sad, maybe it's too materialistic, but I just feel like that works. I don't think government agencies and institutions are great at coming up with great solutions because they're going to make $85,000 a year no matter what they do. That's it, right? But if I can tinker around and in my garage figure out a way to take a drug that does this and make it do that and it's going to cure millions of people, there's value there. And so I'd like to see a way to maintain that somehow, but then maybe make the channels at least more transparent. Like, okay, here are the offerings. And maybe medical schools should be different in terms of, teaching what are the possibilities. What did we used to use in the 1800s? Why don't we use that anymore? You get 17 beta blockers for hypertension. Why should you use one over the other? I don't know that there's time for that. But if I'm a doctor of medicine, I feel like I should be an absolute expert in the pharmacological aspects of things. They don't get very much pharmacological teaching in medical school. And so you rely on the pharmacists for that.
Right.
But when CVS and Walgreens own 80% of the pharmacies and Walmart, again, those are corporations. The pharmacists are employees, and they're going to make the same amount no matter what they do and how they do it, which is, I guess that's good in a way. But it's different to partner. Like back in the day, doctors and pharmacists were kind of partners. Right. The pharmacist would be the expert on the pharmacology. Is that going to interact? Can you have the guy on the same? Doctors had access to all that. I mean, there's a physician's desk references. They were like this thick, and everybody had a new one every year with all the new drugs. And, it was like a huge telephone book of pharmaceuticals. And oftentimes I'd be in a doctor's office and I'd say, let me just look this up. I want to see if there's any, can I give you this based on what you're on? And they would just take the time to do that. Now I'm sure there's digital devices that do that and tell if I'm going to prescribe this, they'll ask. I'm sure they have counted, but it's just I'd like to see a system that allows and rewards incentive. And maybe if we go to a one buyer, maybe if the government takes care of healthcare, maybe there's something in it that if you invent something, if you're a company, maybe instead of IP exclusivity for X amount of years. Maybe it's just we'll pay you a lump sum. It's whatever you invested plus a percentage. So you're guaranteed this profit for coming up with that. Maybe that's the way to do it. And then the healthcare organization, whether it's the government or the HHS, whatever it is, they can do with it what they will. They can say, you know what, this is too expensive to make. We're going to genericize it immediately. Or, hey, we have a good deal on manufacturing. We can get this to the people pretty quickly. Because a lot of things, stuff that people stumble on with healthcare is, I know it didn't cost you $60 to make this pill. This cost you a penny. Why am I paying $60 for it? Well, because we got to pay for all the R&D that went into it. So we got to make that money up before we release patent life. So just if it were me, I guess I don't know that it's a perfect or elegant solution, but I would say, make sure there's an incentive for whoever invents this and brings it to the market, that they get money and a profit, and then it's available to everybody because it's whatever it is, right? And I don't know what that does to taxes. I don't know what that does to are we all paying for each other's health? Is it a giant insurance company? I don't know.
Let me ask you this: if America, and I know you don't know the specific, but I'd love your opinion. If America went the same way as other countries, how would the pharma industry change for that? Would that mean there would be a gross reduction of new drugs invented? If America said, look, we're not going to, if there was a one party, one state solution or whatever with private on the side or whatever, and they said, look, we're not going to be paying tons of money for stuff. Is that what would happen? I mean, I feel like that's America's burden. I mean, China's burden is to make everything cheap, and ours is to invent it. Ours is to subsidize the drug manufacturing, and you know what I mean? That's okay. This is your burden, America. Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a very biased view, but I believe that is true. The first thing that cuts in is mid-90s when President Bill Clinton was elected, he put Hillary in charge of healthcare. He gave her, look, you're going to be the first lady who's actually going to do something that's going to be like politically. And she took healthcare and she started talking about that. Okay, we're going to universalize this. And the first thing manufacturers did was say, well, okay, well, if that's what it looks like, we're cutting R&D budgets. It's typically 25% of everything that goes back into R&D, so we can continue to drive this train. But we're going to cut that down to 10%, and that's where the innovation comes from, right? It's that R&D budget.
Right.
So I feel, just from being in the industry, I think that's true. I think they'll say, well, you know what, we're making billions of dollars on the things that are in the market. We need to focus on making that grow and stretching that out, that work on the IP extensions more than, and I've seen that happen more than let's get new things in. And they've gone from, we're going to do stuff in-house a lot more to, oh, there's a startup company that has this, they're working on, they've got pretty good phase 1, phase 2 data. Let's just buy them. It's cheaper to give them $1 billion for what they got now. We'll bring it in. And so I think that as the prices go down, R&D is that's a first kind of cut. Marketing would be a second kind of cut. But
right.
So those things go down, and I think you get consolidation into, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe people start up with less and are able to come up with something and put. I don't have a good answer. I don't know what happens.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like in some ways the healthcare business seems like an old hospital in a town where you go into it and you see where the original hospital was, and then they just build on, and none of the floors even match up, and it's just this amalgamation of all these parts that don't really fit together very good, because I feel like our system is so complex. And if you started unthreading it, I don't know where it ends.
Yeah. That's a really good description. Yeah.
And yet it's not functioning very well.
Yeah.
The outcomes aren't great. And, I don't know if you've seen that. I don't know what the stat is of the average person in a rest home, how many drugs are on. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think is so interesting is like going to a doctor. I think if you're an American, I don't know how it is in Europe, but if you're an American, I feel like you didn't have a successful trip to the doctor unless you walk away with a prescription. There's nothing that makes you feel more disappointed like, well, he didn't give me anything or she didn't give me anything at the end of this. And it feels like that's what a doctor has become. I feel like a doctor is mostly just a pill pusher. And that is what we think of medicine now. And I just think that's kind of selling it short, but I know that's how I feel. And I don't know.
So they used to, like with hypertension, there were steps that the Joint Commission on Healthcare put out that, like, okay, if you're starting to get high blood pressure, the first thing you should do is adjust your diet. Don't eat so much salt. You should exercise. If you're not exercising at all, you should exercise 3 times a week. If you're exercising, you should do 5. So there were these steps of therapy prior to putting you on any medication. Nobody did it. Nobody likes it. It's like, I don't want to do that. Give me the pill so I can keep eating the way I want to eat.
Yep.
I don't have to exercise. I can watch television, and I can take the pill, and my blood pressure will be low. So they're really, what they're doing is getting rid of symptoms, but they're not curing a disease, right? Especially with hypertension. Right. And they just say, okay, your blood pressure is where it's supposed to be, so your eyes aren't going to pop out of the sockets, and your kidneys are going to last a little bit longer, but you're still unhealthy. We have to change lifestyles if we're going to do that. And I'm a hypocrite because I am that way, but I see that, okay, yeah, if we really want to change our healthcare, we have to change what we're doing as a lifestyle, not necessarily take a pill. But I take 6 pills every morning. I'm 59 years old. I've got 3 stents in my heart, and so those they tell me those things. And I've got type 2 diabetes, and those pills keep me alive
for sure.
And I'm glad that I have access to them. I'd love to not have to take any pills every day, but I don't think I would love it enough to like work out for 2 hours a day and eat only vegetables.
Right.
And that's what my cardiologist says. Oh, you want to lose weight? You should cut all red meat out of your diet. It's like, I'll just kill myself.
So you said, one of the companies you worked for had Ritalin.
Well, it was Adderall.
Oh, Adderall. That's right.
Yeah, slight difference, but yeah.
And were they the ones who owned it originally, or did they buy it from somebody?
They merged with the company that it's an old drug. Adderall was like way pre-FDA. It was on the market, and the guy who like put it into like play for ADHD. It was a weight loss drug. It was
really. What year was that? Like, it was speed. Basically.
Yeah, in the 50s. Yeah, it was 4 methamphetamine salts. So it was speed, and it and doctors wrote it like in the 60s. Oh, you need to lose some weight here. Just take some of these, and it'll help you lose weight. So he saw that there was also an ADHD actual indication to it. He's like, I think we could use this. He was really really smart guy. And he started selling it, and calling on child psychologists or psychiatrists, excuse me, and pediatric guys, and started moving it. And then the company Shire bought that company, merged with it. And they were out of Kentucky, but he merged with it. So,
see, I think maybe you're going to disagree with this, because I thought about Adderall a lot. Because my kids, my son's era, I think, who really a lot of his friends were on that.
Like prescribed.
Yeah. They were hyperactive in school, and in my mind, I go, the school teachers, the parents, the doctors, the government officials, the drug guys, everyone has agreed that we need to make school more convenient for the teacher, more convenient for the teachers and for the parents. And I feel like, what a weird thing that we have put kids on speed instead of said, well, why doesn't a 12-year-old boy want to sit still with his hands under his butt in a desk for 8 hours a day? Well, I'll tell you why, because it's boring.
Yeah. And
kids aren't meant to sit and play like that or sit and do that all day. And yet everyone just bought into it's easier to drug our kids than to change the system. Why don't we make school more interesting? Why don't we make it more active, especially for boys who got the brunt of that? And don't you think that's interesting?
Oh yeah, I mean we're from a generation where there was no medication.
No medication,
and it wasn't even recognized. I don't think that it was like.
And you did lots of recess. Remember,
yeah.
You did tons of recess.
Oh yeah, you were outside playing. Yeah, yeah. It was a different time. I will tell you this, just in I don't even know its defense, but I thought it was very interesting. All of the executives in that company, every one of them had personal stories with how great the product was for their own children. That they were part of that company because they believed in this product, and it helped their kids focus, improved their GPAs immensely. And there was also, again, this is what in the company inside, there was, it's speed. People want it for other reasons, but apparently, and I don't know the science of this, but if you actually have ADHD,
it slows you.
It calms you down.
Yeah.
If you don't have ADHD, it acts like speed does, right? Yeah. So there's, I've never taken it. None of my kids have taken it, which is kind of interesting because, like, my wife and I were 100% certain that our kids, some of them had ADHD, and we would ask the teachers, like, this kid, I mean, he's doing this all the time. Like, nah, your kid doesn't have ADHD. Yeah. They're fine. They're absolutely fine. Like, really? We think they're so. We got pushback from the teachers on that. So we never took them to a doctor for anything like that. And so I don't have the real answer, but it's kind of like. I kind of get what you're saying is did we invent something because we thought we had a cure for it, and so we made it a bigger deal than it really is, or
see,
is it?
I would, but I'm more in the thing that it's more along the American thing of how can we be really efficient? How can we make our kids super efficient at school? Or my sons tell me, gosh, they know tons of people in college before a test. They're all jacking up on Adderall because it'll let them sit down and focus to study for a test. And I'm like, wow, I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of a naturalist in the sense that, I've never been into extra stuff for that. But I think in some ways it's right. Well, how can I increase my ability without actually, doing the hard work? What can I do to actually make it convenient and be better at school or what, Yeah. And part of it's like it is more convenient because like to deal with a kid doesn't want to sit there and be quiet for 8 hours a day. It's inconvenient for the teacher. It's inconvenient for other students. So it's like it's a lot easier just to do that. It's like it's an efficiency thing, which kind of goes back to the whole American. How can I be really efficient and I don't know. It's interesting. It
reminded me of another thing that I feel is that I'm not sure we have a very good education system relatively. I don't know that we should be testing the way that we test.
I agree.
And it's not so much the standardized test. It's just the way that we teach. I mean, to me, and this is, I was a very good student because I figured out really early on, this is what they want to hear. So she's telling me this so I can spit it back to her, right? That's right. And I got that. But I don't think I learned a lot. And I can memorize stuff, and I still remember stuff from 6th, 7th, 5th grade that I learned and when I learned it and how I learned it. But I don't think I was exceptionally smart. I got straight A's. I don't think that meant that I was smart.
Right.
Now, my best friend from high school, little town Emmett, Idaho, he got a Rhodes Scholarship. He went to Oxford, and he was getting a master's and working on a PhD there. And he's like, Greg, you'll never believe how they do this. You get there, they introduce you to the library, they introduce you to your advisor. They say, what are you going to study? I'm going to study this. Okay, there's the library. Go learn everything you can. Read newspapers, any resources you possibly want, we'll get for you. And then you can check in with your advisor once a week. You can take any class you want here on that, but that's going to be your resource. And then after 2 years, you're going to sit in front of a board of teachers, professors, and they're going to ask you, what did you learn? And you're going to tell them, and you're going to pass or fail based on what you can tell them you learned. It's like, that's amazing. I love that, because it's like, that's really a test. That's an incentive to educate yourself. And it's a test that's like not written like, here's what I want you to know. It's what did you learn?
Self-motivated.
Right? Yeah. So I
did not know that.
This was 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago. But I'm thinking, that's a way to educate people, And of course, if it's not the oldest university in the world, it's closed. And I'm thinking they probably know something about education there.
That's interesting. That probably is indicative of like those old guys back in the day. The Thomas Jeffersons and those guys. I mean, they were self-educated for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was a lot of work to get educated.
Yeah,
it wasn't like it was just sitting there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I named one of my children Knox after Henry Knox. He's like a 25-year-old bookshop owner. Didn't know anything about artillery. He read about it, became a general in the Revolutionary Army, and ran the whole artillery thing because of stuff he read, which is like scary, crazy. But like these guys, they did. They were self-educated and they were interested in stuff. And I think, again, this is social commentary. It's probably none of my business, or I shouldn't even think about this stuff. But it's like, the things that we feed into our kids, whether for my generation, it was like cartoons. My dad would be like, it's going to give you nightmares. Don't watch those. It's bad. Right? And now we have so much information and content that we can put at young people, even just choosing what am I interested in, but more importantly, discerning, is this real? Is this truth? Is this just something somebody's putting out there to sell me something?
Yeah.
It's a really confusing situation for self-education. But I think that's what the principles of the country were built upon, that, right? We can only have a democracy if we have an educated population. And so we have to provide school. I've heard the idea that, no, we have to provide schools so that the people can go to work and somebody can take care of their kids while they're working, which is more, a little bit more sarcastic or cynical. But I like the first one better. I like the idea that, John Adams, the Massachusetts Constitution, was like, we can't do a democracy if we don't have an informed public. They have to be able to read. They have to be able to know, to make decisions. And I still believe that, it's got to be true.
So your experience, and I'm happy to hear that, the people you worked with genuinely cared about what they were doing.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. We were there to make money. It was our livelihood. But I don't know anybody that would have fudged a trial, mismanaged things in order to make money. And it was like, if something went wrong in a clinical trial, we were crushed, because we knew we thought this was going to be great.
Right.
Turns out it causes more damage than it helps. We got to scratch it. We got to write it off and move on to something else. And that was sad for people. So
the other thing that's obvious, Greg, is that you enjoyed your career.
Loved it. I can't imagine doing anything different for anything. So.
And it's kind of infectious, your enthusiasm that way. If you had advice for young people, what would that be going in careers?
So that's it's interesting, because I do have 8 kids, and only 3 of them really know what they want to do. The rest knew what they wanted to do, but as they get into it, you become disillusioned, because it's not what I thought it was. It's not this, or it's harder to get there than I thought it was going to be, or whatever it is. So I guess and I don't know if it's good advice, but I always told my kids, you should find stuff that you like to do. And more importantly than stuff, find people that you like to do it with. Because if you can clean out horse stables if you're with people that you enjoy doing it with, and it's fun. And you don't, and it's not so much about, which is a hard thing to say, it's not so much about what you're going to get paid as it is that you can live. You get paid enough to live, but that you're happy every day. If you're, one of my kids is a lawyer. I've never met a lawyer who enjoys litigating, and he loves it. He loves it, and I just think it's cool that he's found something that he loves to do, and he gets paid for it. So I don't think that was very common most of history. You worked because you just had to.
That's true.
And I think we live in a day and age today. It's much more likely that you can find something you enjoy doing and people that you enjoy doing it with than ever before. And so that would be my advice. Just life's too short to be miserable 8 to 10 hours a day because you don't like what you're doing and the people you're doing it with. So
thanks for coming in, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. This was kind of fun. I don't expect that anybody to really care about any of this.
You never know.
Or that it's interesting even, but it's fun to just talk about life a little bit. So, pleasure.
you, sir.
All right. Thank you.